There we go. We are now recording. I will drop the link to the agenda in the chat, and if you could toss your name on the attendees list, that would be great. Today is May 6th, and this is the biweekly ContribEx meeting. I am Bob Killen, one of the chairs of Contributor Experience. And like all our other meetings, we abide by the CNCF Code of Conduct, which essentially boils down to please be excellent to each other. If someone could, I don't have an assigned note taker field in there, but if someone wouldn't mind taking notes, that'd be great. Thank you. And are there any new contributors on the line? I don't believe so. I think everyone here is sort of our regulars. So with that, we'll just kick it off and go right into our normal recurring business. Events, office hours. George said he couldn't make it.
I have an update for that. I can talk about it.
Okay.
We have an English-themed office hours planned for maybe the first week of June if there's no big pushback. We contacted SIG Network. We have 2 panelists that will help us facilitate that. But if people from SIG ContribEx or the usual office hours panelists want to join, we are more than happy.
Okay. Do you happen to have an update on the community meeting as well? Were you working with George on that?
No, I think that Paris should have. Or?
Okay. Nah. We'll just skip over that for now. Regarding the contributor summits, we have actually decided to cancel the EU contributor summit. A lot of people are experiencing virtual sort of event fatigue, and with it so close to Boston, it just didn't make sense to run it. We will still host a virtual new contributor workshop, but that will not be like butting up right against the actual KubeCon event. That will be, I think we're targeting July. Do you remember, Josh, by chance?
Well, we're targeting having the materials ready for mid-July. We didn't actually talk about a specific schedule for a live version.
Okay.
Among other things, for a live version, we'd have to talk about, what time zone band is it going to be in, which is a bit of a challenge. I really think that on-demand recorded content will get used more frequently.
Yeah, I agree. We'll take that one to your figure the details of that one out in the mentoring meeting. Steering committee election. There is now a kickoff issue. We have you can see the link in the agenda. We have a few candidates in mind. Josh, you offered and volunteered, and we've been poking a few others about it, and we'll be ramping up on that one soon. Time zones under other discussions. Jonas?
Yeah, so this just came up earlier today. I see some mixed results here when meeting times are in UTC, and then we change them depending on daylight savings time here in the US. Should we do that, or should we do something else?
So we actually had one of the biggest things we debated back when coming up with the documentation style guide is that we would stick at least to something like ET or PT, essentially something that travels with daylight savings time. Mm-hmm. Just to save from having to, there are so many dates and times throughout the entire project, you'd be going in there and having to update it all over the place. So that was sort of the main thinking behind that. If you want, I can grab the link to that section.
Although
where is it?
there are some SIGs that I know that actually have their meeting times pegged to UTC, because I watch them jump around the calendar every time daylight savings time switches over.
And yeah, I know the time zone conversation happens every like 6 months, roughly.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you already have it in the style guide, then I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah, that was just the general consensus that we came to, like last time after it got hashed out. I'd have to go. Sorry, Paris.
I was gonna say, I wonder if we should do a poll. Like, I don't know if we've ever actually measured the community as far as like preference. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just curious because like I'm on team whatever the community needs, right? Like if that means I'm converting, like so be it kind of thing. But I actually don't know. I mean, I feel like I hear so many different takes. I mean, I even saw Hippie's take about GMT on the mailing list today. So I'm just I'm almost curious, but at the same time, I'm not shaking trees and catching bees right now either, unless it's an Animal Crossing. So, so anyway, so Jonas, that's just my long-winded attempt of saying like I empathize, but at the same time, I feel like we've gotten into this conversation 45 times, and it's like everybody's just like different takes. So I'm also kind of curious if there is like a trend though. So that's my TLDR. Sorry.
If we do a poll, it has to come with a lot of explanations because I think a lot of people fundamentally don't understand the way the time zones work. A lot of people don't realize the UTC doesn't change with daylight savings time. A lot of people also don't realize that, you know, which countries switch to daylight savings time and which places don't. Like most of us, you know, I live in Europe. Most of the European countries have daylight savings time. It just happens to change on a different date as the US one. So there are all these like complications that I feel like a lot of people don't understand the way they work, which is part of what causes a lot of this conversation over and over and over in every project I've ever worked in.
I'm curious what the actual wording that we got into the style guide was, because I remember it slightly differently. If I remember it correctly, it's use whatever time zone that your SIG is deciding the meeting is going to be in. So if it tracks daylight savings, then use a time zone that tracks daylight savings. If it doesn't, then don't, because I think we just left it up to the SIG to decide like what time zone they would be based out of and whether it would track daylight savings or not. But hey, if you are tracking daylight savings, make sure to use Pacific time or Eastern time or something like that that tracks daylight savings so that you don't need to go and update your calendar every 6 months.
I actually have it up right here. Times for single events such as KubeCon should be expressed in the absolute time zone, such as Pacific Standard Time or UTC for the specific event, since that's happening in a region and everyone will essentially be on that clock. Times for recurring events should be expressed in a time zone that follows daylight savings time, such as Pacific time or Eastern time. And either way, we ask people to supply a link to a time zone converter.
Just a quick note, we've been talking about following daylight savings time, and for you Northern Hemispherians, all of you move together. For all of us in the Southern Hemisphere, it means my staff can't wake up early enough to attend the meetings that are pinned in Northern Hemispherian daylight savings time. And I don't think I've heard that in the conversation yet today.
Yeah, also, daylight savings switches differently in EU and the US time zones, right? Like there's like a 2 weeks difference where US already has shifted, or like American time zones.
I'll be a bit more clear. In the spring, you spring forward, but that's not our spring, that's our fall. We fall backward. And there is a period of time when the meeting times shift over 3 different hours for my current time zone. And that means I have to switch my entire day in my life around Northern Hemispherian daylight savings time. And some of my team who really make it hard for them to switch that amount of time who are really smart, and I'd love to be on some of these meetings, can't attend because they are too tired. They can't switch for that one day to show up and contribute to this community. And that makes me sad.
Yeah, we have the same issue with our teams over in Australia. That's the same thing there. With Switch, it's a 2-hour time difference all of a sudden, implemented in just a few short weeks compared to what it was before. So yeah, I totally understand that.
Our general, like, we've tried to accommodate that more with the specific like APAC meeting. I am, you know, if it would work best to possibly, you know, adjust the time at least for this meeting, I am not against that. But it's, you know, we do have people in the EU, in the US, and, you know, APAC, and trying to find a good time is very difficult. This came up for like the one of the other groups that I chair for, the research user group and the CNCF, and we tried a rotating schedule, and that wound up not working out too well, and it just we fell back to our old schedule, and that has gotten people attending again.
So I guess there's two questions here, and maybe this goes toward, I'll direct this towards Jonas, since he raised the issue initially. Are we talking about specifically concerns around contributor experiences meetings and contributor experience time zones? Or are we talking about the general guidance that we give to all SIGs for how they represent their meetings and stuff in documentation? Or is it both?
I'm sorry, Chris, was that a question for me?
At least for the initial part of the discussion, yes. Like, where this concern was raised, is it just general guidance that we give to SIGs and working groups, or is it specific to ContribEx, or is it both?
This is just from the initial concern here was because we had the Meet Our Contributors meeting today. And depending on where you look in different documents, it's in UTC and in different times, depending on where you look. And that's fine if it's in UTC, but then we should follow UTC and not have to update the UTC time every time we switch over to DST because we want the meeting to follow PT. So instead of us having to do a bunch of manual tasks throughout all the meeting documents, every time we do DST changes, we should say, hey, here's the time. That's the genesis of my concern.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And and I guess that one, at least to me, when I look at that based on our current wording, it's kind of a sticky situation where we're right in the middle. Because I could both see you saying like, okay, Meet Our Contributors, it's specific, like sort of one-time events that we advertise, but it's a one-time event on a regular cadence.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not meeting where we absolutely need everybody in the room at the same time, but it is an event that we're trying to get a global audience for. So and we don't necessarily always have North American like speakers in that. And I think, don't we also have 2 different times that we do Meet Our Contributors at, or is it just the one? Or no, that's office hours. I think it's where we still have 2 again.
No, we fell back to 1, and then we got enough people interested that we now have 2 for office hours, as well as like some of the one-off ones that are being created. And I think, Paris, you were talking about starting up a second MOC.
Yep, but that's off topic. So, yeah, I mean, I will follow whatever we need to follow for Meet Our Contributors, straight up. Like, tell me what it is and we will follow it. That's my TLDR there.
Do you, maybe we should add this to the yearly contributor survey?
Yeah.
Add a little poll to it.
That's an idea.
Well, I have resistance to that because again, this question, the scope of this question blows up really quickly.
So, 1 sec.
Yeah, that's absolutely a possibility. So if we scope it down to the meetings that we handle here through ContribEx, and start there.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about like just contributor experience meetings, then like basically my opinion is I don't care. whatever the group ends up wanting as far as scheduling and stuff is concerned. It gets tricky with, you know, like there isn't necessarily a way to win in this. Like if we pin it to North American DST, then there'll be parts of the world that are, you know, have multi-hour offsets from it. If we pin it to UTC, then as countries that do observe daylight savings time shift their schedules, then we're going to run into conflicts anyways, because there'll be some meetings that move, some meetings that don't. And where it worked half the year, now it doesn't work the other half of the year. So I don't think there's necessarily a way to win, but I guess my general feeling is if we're deciding, we need to make a decision for ContribEx, sure, but I don't think that we should decide or even like really make recommendations to other SIGs. Like this is going to be a question that every SIG kind of has to figure out what's the best situation for themselves based on their audience. And then just hopefully record it in a similar way. So I would even be like, I would be pro changing some of our style guide wording to explicitly say like, hey, you know, this is a very like personal decision for the SIG, kind of like when is best to meet for the SIG and how to record that, but be mindful one way or another that as time zones shift, it's like that's going to have an impact in multiple different ways on your contributors, no matter which decision you pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to, this does have a huge impact on the contributor experience, right, of the project, even the individual SIGs. So I think we just need to continue to provide guidance where we can.
I really like how you worded it, Christoph, because the SIGs are pretty much autonomous as well. They are supposed to take decisions by themselves. Just make sure it's properly recorded. So we can provide, hey, here's the template. Here's how you should word it. Here's how you handle your meetings, and give them a few options and just let them pick.
Jonas, do you want to take that as an AI to update the style guide?
Sure.
Okay.
I need to jump off. I got another meeting.
Okay.
But yeah, please, yes, I'm more than happy to start that.
Okay.
Good one, folks.
If there's nothing else on this topic people want to discuss, we can move on to mentoring. Okay. Paris, meet our contributors. It looked like it went pretty well this morning.
Yeah, it was probably a lower attended one than usual. I did not make it to Friday's upstream meeting and did not do the proper promoting. We had, I think it was 30 people concurrently, or 30, something like 75 uniques and yeah, I don't remember the numbers, but yeah, something like 75 uniques. So not bad, but we usually see 100 plus. As far as the second one is concerned, now that we're here, I still need to figure out the second time. I have a ton of hosts that have offered to do evening and or take the morning. But I just have not had the time to get that going and set that up. And again, that would be for a second time for Meet Our Contributors.
Cool. Any questions on that before we move on to the next section? Okay, I think Ihor, you're up.
Few updates. So Google Summer of Code, Monday, we have just moved to the stage of the, all the students for this year have been selected. CNCF is proceeding with 20 slots this year, and we have a few of them allocated to Kubernetes. And also some good news about Community Bridge, the different mentorship program, which is similar to Google's Summer of Code, but driven by Linux Foundation. We are at the stage when potential mentees are applying for participating in this program, and we have also slots available for Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is listed on the website, and people can start applying there. That's it for now.
Okay. Are there any questions for Ihor? Okay. Community management, need to know. We have 2 items in there already. I don't know of any other pressing things that should be added to it yet.
I can add something about the SIG chair meeting if you need something in order for it to go.
Okay, yeah, that would give us 3, so we could then fire it off after that. The 2 other things that we have in there are like George is helping facilitate sort of SIG specific office hours, and then just the notification about the Contributor Summit EU being canceled. And I don't see Nikita or anyone. Could anyone give the update from the APAC coordinator? Okay. Next, GitHub management. Is there anything you can think of, Christoph, before I sort of talk about pruning the org?
No, I think pruning the org's the big one. Okay.
So this one is probably going to, like, I'm going to fire something off to our list about this. I'm in meetings the rest of the day, so it'll probably be tomorrow. But we have an open issue. I'll go find it about stale org members. And after doing a little bit of auditing, looking at our member activity, we have roughly 150 people that have had zero activity across any of the Kubernetes orgs in the past 18 months. So that's since the 1.11 release. We would like to remove these people from the org because being a member of the org gives them an elevated set of permissions, and org access also translates to, well, not quite yet, but does translate to some other things. We did have the idea to potentially, like, these people that are removed, if they become active again, being able to sort of shortcut our normal, membership procedure where you have to have 2 sponsors. So essentially, if you show yourself as active again, then okay, cool, we can add you. Does anyone have opinions on this, or any thoughts?
So if if somebody reactivates, a GitHub admin could just activate them?
It would be basically cutting a PR in K-org. We have our new membership coordinators that could do it, but just be adding their handle back to the list.
One question that I kind of ask broadly for opinions on is, do we necessarily need a shortcut process at all? The reason being, the reason that this comes up is we want to make it easy for people to rejoin, but also at the same time, like our bar for org membership is already very low. And if you are active again, finding 2 sponsors shouldn't be
difficult.
Shouldn't be too difficult. So it comes down to like, do we need to necessarily modify that process and add that shortcut in? Is that a good idea? Could we just keep it simplified with the current structure? How do people feel on that one way or another?
Yeah, I think I personally like what you suggested, Christoph. Keeping it simple, keep it as what we have today, right? The other thought that are we giving any notification to folks which are inactive? Like that's more like an issues stall, right? That hey, you are not active, and if you're not getting back to active within certain time frame, you will be removed as an org member or something.
Not really, to be honest. This is a year and a half, and this is any GitHub event except for approves to the UI that we keep track of. So in the past, essentially a year and a half, they have not engaged in GitHub at all.
Gotcha. But it makes sense then. Yeah.
Yeah. If we tag them and they act, that also then counts as an action.
True. Okay.
Is there any specific orgs that are SIGs that are specifically like hit by this? Like maybe we can reach out to the SIGs and ask them, hey, do you know what happened to these people? Does that make sense?
Not like we don't really have a mapping of like person to SIG easily outside of like looking at owners files. This would remove about 40 people from owners files. But to be honest, if they're in an owners file and they haven't had any activity in a year and a half, then they should probably be removed from the owners file altogether.
I agree.
Okay. Are there any other thoughts on this before like I move to cut something off and send it off to the list?
My perspective is whatever the GitHub admins want to do is okay.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to Slack infra and let's see. Pierre, I know you got something going.
There was a discussion, I think, who triggered it, I don't know anymore, about like having some kind of automated moderation happening when you, for example, write guys in the chat and basically educating the people. And I wanted to have something how we can do it. But there's also like a lot of issues that have gone stale in the repository. And I'm just wondering what kind of issues we want to tackle with the Slack infrastructure. Are we currently in a state where we are happy, then we don't need to do anything? Or do we want to actually like improve on certain topics? I'm not super sure if it's like a topic for this group. But yeah, I like think since Slack infra is like belonging to ContribEx, I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, it's mostly like, so Slack infra was largely maintained by one person, and she has now, well, she's still, a part of the project. Her main responsibility is not the project. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of been one of the, what we have works, and the other things are all very like nice to haves, but it's sort of been like low-hanging fruit isn't necessarily the right word for it. It's just wasn't the highest priority at the time.
It would be nice to have, right? But for example, the channel-based moderators, which was like a feature that was announced to me in January, is maybe still interesting and maybe something we still want to have. So I'm just like wondering.
Oh, that one I know we definitely want to have.
Right, but there's, for example, no issue for it. So I don't know where to find it. But I message her.
Okay, I thought there was an issue for it. It might have been a conversation, Catherine wrote up a proposal for it and how it should be designed. That might have just been shared with the Slack admins and not publicly. Can dig that stuff up though. We can like talk after this or.
For sure.
Okay. Any other Slack infra stuff before move on? Okay. Contributor documentation. There isn't a huge update here for the contributor guide. For the developer guide, we did submit a season of docs request. This is to hopefully get a tech writer to help us improve our developer guide. I've linked the sort of brief description there if anyone is interested. No updates from the non-code guide. On the contributor site, we're actually pretty far along now with converting it over to Doxy. The PR is actually stalled. It's in a state ready to be merged, but discovered a small bug in GitHub and it not displaying the commits correctly. And so I'm waiting to hear back from them on that one before I merge it. Okay. Any questions on that before we move to sort of our open discussion items?
I guess I have one because I did that pull request on the triage guide, which is in the contributor guide, and just wanted to point it out. You helped me, but I guess we're going bigger.
Oh, is that in state to be ready to be re-reviewed?
Yeah, all the questions you had were I addressed.
Okay.
And then there were just a couple of things that we left open because pending changes this week.
Okay. I will give that a look. Again, probably won't happen today just because I'm literally in back-to-back meetings, but I will look at it probably tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thank you for doing it. Really appreciate it. It was.
Yeah, I mean, I was mentioning.
It surfaced a lot of things that were very wrong and out of date.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned to you, and then I was speaking with Sasha earlier from the release team, just about how we could maybe create a flow, like a simple happy path in the guide with more detailed information that links to each step, like, because I know for me, getting up to speed on how the processes all work, I have like a fresh, the fresh eyed, and I'm just seeing like, how do all these things fit together? So yeah. I'm wondering if anybody here has any thoughts on just even sketching how that flow works to save the technical writer some time.
On the development side, it's even a little bit more, it's a little bit more complicated too. I wouldn't mind getting together at some point, but like right now it would probably be at least a week at the earliest.
Oh yeah, we can do whenever. It'd just be like a short-term week or two from now, or within the next week or two. Like, what I could do is even draft the flow as I perceive it and see like, okay, does this match reality? And then it's just one step farther along in that process of bringing the threads together.
Yeah. Would anyone else be interested in helping too? Hippie? Cool.
Because I think it can factor in on like PR velocity and like triage. All these process-related questions are being actively discussed, and it all kind of points back to the workflow, things going through the system, getting approved and merged, etc.
Okay. How about we sync up later on that, and we can try and pick a time to go through it.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. With that, now we are at our open mic discussions. And the first sort of elephant in the room one was the discussion about potentially moving back to a weekly cadence on our meetings, with the general goal of having them be shorter and people not feeling like they miss everything if they happen to miss out on a meeting. We'd probably do other things like send out try and get the agenda out ahead of time, or at least call for items ahead of time as well. Do you folks have thoughts on this?
SIG release has a calendar item actually for a 24-hour deadline for agenda items. I don't see why we can't as well.
That's not a bad idea. The other, like, part of the reason we were talking about potentially folding, like going back to the weekly cadence, is actually folding or canceling some of our other meetings that haven't been very well attended. And sort of the pattern that's happened is because there's another meeting, it just sort of assumes things are being done in that meeting. They aren't, necessarily getting bubbled up. With them being a part of our main meeting, we'd potentially surface them more and get more people engaged with them. And Paris, you made a suggestion.
Yeah, I was just going to say if we went weekly, which I'm not necessarily a fan of, but I would like to point conversations then, meaning not do stand up every week, do stand up bi-weekly, and some project owners bi-weekly, and then some kind of discussion topic so that folks don't feel, especially sub project owners, don't feel like they have to come every week. That something like that would be my suggestion, just to reduce burnout.
Yeah. Some of the stuff. So we at the last meeting, towards the tail end, and I want to going over to issue triage. We were sort of talking about different ideas to sort of tackle that. Like, a lot of the stand-up-y type stuff. It might not even necessarily need to be talked about if it's all in the agenda, or specifically call out things that people want to talk about. We have there's a couple different ideas.
Yeah, did you see, that's an item I brought up before, below. I did a take 2 on the marketing subgroup agenda to kind of address their feedback about where do we put notes during meetings, and how do we shove the status updates in a place where we can also see them. I can pull up the link if you'd like.
That would be cool.
Okay, I'll do that right now.
Okay. Actually, while you do that, just because we have 18 minutes left, I'm going to move on to the next item, and then we can come back to it. I think because you have another item in here. So the next item, Paris, you brought this to my attention, and just like the SIGs aren't currently meeting the governance requirements of doing the quarterly update, and this includes ContribEx. We missed this one too. This is because a lot of us were banking on doing the update with KubeCon, and that didn't quite happen. And so, like, one of the potential ideas would be to sort of, while our standard update before was the community meeting, we were having them, weekly, and we got through all the SIGs, like every quarter. Maybe it still is a part of the community meeting responsibility to ping the SIGs that need to have their, sort of update due that month. But only some of them are actually reporting in person during the community meeting, and then the others essentially have their presentation or something like that attached to the list. Did you have any other ideas?
No, I would love to hear them though. Yeah, Bob summed that up. So, and I know Christoph's on the call too, and this is something that we don't actually talk about, this very specific issue in steering, so to speak, but we've been talking about something larger. But yeah, no, I noticed that, only I think 3 SIGs emailed an update last quarter to KDev, and since we've reduced those meetings, that's also reduced their reminders to do those things. So we need to figure out some kind of, added improvement to either remind SIGs or something. And it would just be nice, in my opinion, if we had some kind of document that collected updates on a monthly basis, kind of like what I see for Apache. Like Apache projects have like these report pages, for instance, and then you can go in and click them on like a quarterly basis and see what's up with them. So like we have all of that stuff, we just don't necessarily collate it. So trying to figure out how we could do that, especially maybe even on an automated basis, because that does sound very human intensive, which obviously I'm not in favor of either. So for folks on the call, like if you want to partner with me on something like that, I'm just trying to figure out how we can best support our SIGs and not, you know, knock on doors and say you owe us an update, because that's the wrong approach. Trying to help them and help them give community updates is a better approach.
Yeah, I face this issue at work daily. So
that's why I'm so like not really like, I usually come to the table with some kind of idea. That's why I'm just like
no, it's really hard.
What about reducing the updates to like a forum or something?
Yeah. This has been helpful in my experience. You create the template in the place, you make it as easy as possible, and that can increase your chances of getting the results you want.
Well, Laurie, let me have you look at the deck template that we give.
Sure.
It's clearly, and I agree with you, by the way. So I'm saying you've got that fresh eye that I like. So look at the template and see how you can make it easier, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's not enough.
Yeah. Maybe it's a
instead
of a deck, right? Like that's cool too. I would love to just get more frequent information and make it easier on them. I think that's very important here.
Yeah.
As you see too. So
sometimes you make it as easy and clear as pie, and it's still
yeah.
I think we've all experienced that one.
So, but yeah, the doc I shared is just trying to bring the marketing team kind of around to that. Like, if you click at the link, just that it shows it creates a template. Like the ideas, they would copy and paste, their status updates straight into an email, and then it gives them the template for like the planning. They can click link by link from the table down to like another template for note taking and discussion. But the idea was they would just have all of these status updates for their meeting, go over them, review them at the meeting, and then just drop it in an email. I don't know if that would be sufficient or something like that, but it's just one option.
Sorry, did someone say something there?
I was just commenting that this is good.
Thanks. I think the challenge is from Ms. Paris's comment was like, how do we collate? How do we get all the SIGs information in a single place? So that's another. Is that right? That's the challenge now, putting it all in the same place. Yeah.
And with the community meeting that we used to have every Thursday, I mean, we would have we could cycle through 3 to 4 community groups in one meeting, which meant we were like the governance requirements were just getting met naturally because they were just flowing. Now that it's once a month, because we're trying to do a nice thing and, reduce the burden, that also means that only 3 SIGs a month instead of 12 get an update. So that means 8 SIGs have to just be naturally, have some kind of natural inclination to, hey, we need to do an update this quarter and we need to send it to the mailing list. And that's where it's like the gap, I think, is. And like former chair, and I see Bob as chair, it's like you just don't necessarily like think of that unless you have like a reminder on your calendar. So
I didn't think of it.
Yeah. No,
I just assumed the community, or I assumed the KubeCon, and that like once KubeCon got canceled, that kind of all like it just didn't click.
Maybe it's just an email reminder to SIG on a little like reminder, optional, optional, not required, that says, did you submit your quarterly update? I mean, even something that simple, maybe. would suffice for now. But right now we just have like a gap right there where it's like we just expect chairs to like magically think, oh, it's my time.
Yeah. Well, I
Well,
wonder, there's two options as well
actually-
with Slack auto reminders, either the SIG chairs and leads, you could have an auto reminder in there, or if it's not too aggro, put it in the SIG channel proper.
Yeah.
I do want to like continue this conversation, but
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we have 2 more items and 10 more minutes, and
Okay.
I unfortunately have a hard stop in, and I might be able to get a little bit more time, but have another meeting like right after this. So actually, Laura, you have an update on the PR velocity and issue triage?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
hitting
and
us a little
most
bit
of this is documented, and most of you are CC'd somehow on most of the things that I've been doing. So I don't really need to go over that. The only topic for discussion would be, like, I made the request yesterday on the dev stats for a number of dashboard adjustments. And so then this kind of raises the question. So I saw that Lukash actually CC'd Josh and Dan Cohn. So Josh can comment as when he has time, but maybe the question there is just like, the reason for the dashboard requests is like, I'm still a little ignorant on every detail, but basically you have community management and you have a certain set of metrics that you're looking for community management. And then you also want to have metrics around workflow, and you want to be able to identify, like in our case, SIGs whose workflows may need improvement. And so the request that I pitched yesterday does some comparative analysis. It's meant to simplify like how you can get some of the key metrics SIG by SIG. And I pulled up the issue here. I'll drop it in the chat. So basically, as far as I can tell from my usage of the dev stats, you have to go through repo groups and look up specific SIGs, and then you get a bunch of metrics related to them. And what I'm looking for is SIG to SIG. How are you doing on block PRs? How are your workflows comparing to each other? So that's meant to actually, behind the scenes, examine problems in the system, like, how are these teams comparing to each other, and then where do we see a heavy workflow or a workload that we would like to prioritize? Okay, helping a SIG reduce that workload because it's an impediment. And all the data is roughly there, but you just kind of have to manually put it together. Like, that's why I created that a spreadsheet with it.
You have to tease it all
and
out.
I'd rather just have it automated. And then maybe this would actually, I asked the follow-up question, do we know how SIG chairs and leads are actually even using the dev stats? Maybe, they obviously exist.
By and large, they aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for a while when we were pushing dev stats more heavily, and including like a chart from dev stats in the weekly community meeting, etc., Lucas and I were keeping a check on IP addresses that had actually, that had actually done more than hit the homepage.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very narrow set of IP addresses.
Mm.
My experience is that SIG chairs look at dev stats basically when they have a particular problem with something, and somebody tells them, "Oh, that's actually already on dev stats."
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, they don't.
Mm-hmm. So when I was shopping I was filling out the contact sheet, like just the chairs and leads. Can you tell Paris how you would like to be communicated with? I was also dinging them like, hey, I've also collected some data about your SIGs. Would you like to see that data? And everybody said yes. And then that was it, except for a few cases. And so there's interest. I wonder if there's just too many metrics for these folks to actually even parse. Because there are a lot of metrics and they're all useful for different audiences, but maybe we want to pull out some specific ones. Like if you're responsible for workflow for your SIG? What are the metrics that you need to know to understand how your SIG is performing?
Potentially create like a dashboard for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I don't want to cut you off early.
No.
But I want to give Hippie his time too. So so we can continue in Slack.
Fine, pushing this off to another meeting. It's let's listen to her. It's fine.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I don't know where else to raise these because I'm pinging you all individually, but we're all together, so that's but yeah, these are just things like we might want to think about. And like I see SIG chair based on the description and the handbook draft, you're kind of like you're responsible for prioritization, and that means workflow, and so therefore you're kind of like a product owner in some regards. The tech lead is also the technical peer of that quasi product owner, and so you want to also see some metrics indicating how you're getting stuff out the door, or like what are you missing. If you have a bunch of priority urgent issues, and I mean nobody does right now, so as far as I can see, so that's good. But if you had 5, right, what are you going to do with that stuff? You want to see the number, and then you would prioritize acting on those to get them out of your box and into the release, because I think that's what they're dependent on. They're classified as urgent for the release coming up.
And the problem with I mean, the reason why any substantial improvements to DevStat stopped is we were not getting feedback from the SIG leads on what it was they wanted to see, right?
Yeah.
We're like, okay, we have a ton of second level data here, right? So pick some of this out and say, hey, if you could put this with this and that, it would tell me what I wanted. And we just did not get that feedback, even with putting out calls for feedback.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't want to spend a lot of time producing third order data that nobody's going to look at because it's complicated.
Sorry.
Yeah, and for a lot of things like urgent PRs and that sort of thing, the SIG leads can more or less get what they want by GitHub query directly.
They can. Yeah, some of them for sure. GitHub query would be the best approach. There's enough. Some of the metrics, maybe not. And I think if you're also if you're the steering committee or you're trying to get the overall picture of how SIGs are doing, where they might need help, then those overall comparative metrics can be useful. And you can also tell the story a lot more immediately than like doing a manual search, like going in a specific date and time, using GitHub, pulling queries, getting some numbers, and then showing it to the SIGs. Like real time would help automate that.
Maybe we can talk about some I know you have some of the queries outlined in there. Possibly if a test dashboard is something to be whipped up, we can take it to the SIG chairs and TLs meeting to get some more feedback on that.
Yeah, I think we could have a really interesting discussion of what are the 3 metrics that point to what do we think are the most important ones for showing and telling the story of PR velocity, where it's going well, where it might need help, and giving them just 3 things to look at, and then the rest of us can look at the 30 things to look at because we like these numbers and
because we're data nerds.
Yeah, exactly. And then it starts incrementally, them taking ownership of some of the metrics related to workflow if they haven't in the past. At least there's not data overload.
It might be interesting to look at some of the stuff we're doing with API Snoop. We have some data metrics that we use that collect PR velocity. And it's a complicated process because it starts off of trying to identify the possible pieces of things we want to test and having a discussion, a ticket about that, and then going through and creating a test from scratch based on the conversation and then promoting it. So that you were talking about process and flow, and I think it would be good to maybe spend some time showing you some of the tooling we have and get your fresh eyes on that and amplify that through what's usable for the rest of it.
That'd be great. And you've heard of Triage Party, I'm sure. It's been
Yeah.
floating around, and then there's
Lovely stuff.
yeah. So like there are SIGs hacking this already. Like they want prioritization, so that's great. They're good models.
I have a hard stop at this point. I'm sorry. If people want to continue this discussion, please feel free to continue to use the Zoom meeting. If you do happen to have anything, please toss it in the notes. That'd be super, very much appreciated.
I'll stay on if anybody else wants to stay on.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll stay on.
Paris, can I promote you to host?
Do it.
Okay.
Thanks for yielding the floor, Hippie, by the way. That was nice of you.
Thank you, and thanks for continuing the conversation.
You're doing some really neat stuff that our community really needs. So we need the fresh eyes in particular, and fresh eyes that produce a stairway for others to come along is super. And so yes, you have as much floor as you need.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I'm solving these problems, working on them all the time with the delivery teams in my company, and so it's really cool to be in this place. Like both experiences can inform each other. I learn here, I take learnings there, bring it back, blah blah blah. But
I didn't.
Hippie. What were you going to bring?
Okay, I'll share my screen real quick. No, we can't do that anymore. It's not allowed.
I can hold on, don't move.
It's a super secret way of doing said things. So.
Yeah, that's to prevent Zoom bombing.
Yes, the times we live in, my. I know,
right? Try now.
All right, let's do it.
That is even a term, like Zoom bombing.
1, 2, 3, desktop 3. And over here, there's a link to the sharing ebits. And this is an idea that comes from a project that's been dead for about 7 years called Sign. And I brought it up to kind of see what we could do. And let's say we want someone to work on Kubernetes. I can't spell today. This is net.
Yes.
Thank you. And if I want to collaborate on a GitHub project, it automatically OAuths me back into the thing and says, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you here today." And then of course, the demos being what they do, it didn't work. So we'll run this again. And it's just a real simple interface that says, who do you want to code with today? And you put in a list of those people. Currently, the AWS key, because this was Amazon based, you actually just paste it in here, and the HTTP request goes through. I think it is sent to the server, but it's not saved anywhere, and it just redirects to create the instance. And we auto set up all of the things for the region. I've minimized it to just do Sydney because that's near me, and we auto set up the AMI. What's fun is that instance gets spun up. I'm gonna go back to our mentoring notes. No, that's over here. The code underneath it is in the sharing.io or sharing.io repo that I created, or org. And it's based off some technomancy stuff that they did a while back. And it was inspired by some software on Pair.io. So setting up your own, we could totally Kubernetify this. This was back, the project currently is set up to deploy to Heroku. So we're super close to being there. If we go back to how it sets things up, it actually uses, for your user, you set up your own preferences config. So if you fork this for your user and go through, it runs through the bootstrap. And the bootstrap copies all these things into the home folder. What it allows when you're done is it displays, please SSH to pairing or II at this new box, and it sets up DNS and everything, and then you just run teammate to connect. So it allows people who may not know each other yet find a safe middle ground to do some pairing on and coding on. And although right now this defaults to using things like teammate or teammux, which is a terminal-based SSH thing, there's no reason we couldn't bring up like Microsoft VS Code or things people are more familiar with on this shared box. We do a lot of this at II, but currently we just use packet boxes and spin them up for the duration and then bring them down. But yeah, just interested in, is this part of the tooling we need for pairing is to find a safe place to spend time together.
Would you donate this to the SIG and you would remain on as owner?
All yours, or all ours. It's always all ours. Anything in life is just yours for the caretaking about us.
Okay, well, yeah, let's, we can talk about that at another meeting. I was just curious to where you were with that. So what do you need? What do you feel like you need from us? Like, what do you feel like is like lingering or unanswered or stuff like that?
Right now, AWS donates some resources and right now I've got an account that's through the CNCF for API Snoop, and I'm doing some of this work on there because I'm actively doing some stuff for API Snoop with it. It would be, where would we like this stuff to go? Who wants to own the running, like the infrastructure portion of that? Is it CNCF? Do we need to go back and ask for it? And is it Amazon? Do we want to do it based on membership? There's just, I guess, more planning. Yeah. What do we want?
So the first step here is owners of the mentoring folder, as well as the SIG chairs and the tech leads, need to get together to decide on if the thing needs funding. And so what your next step should be how much, like, what are we talking about here? Give us some hardcore information there. And then we have a steering committee process that has a process that's already been established with CNCF, and that's how we get funding for Kubernetes. So like security audits, all that fun stuff too. So this would come from there. So, but ultimately steering would say, is the SIG cool with this? And usually they get that from like a tech lead or something like that. So either if you want to start on the ContribEx mailing list or in the mentoring sub-project meeting, and then we finish it off here, and then we put in the formal request to steering, that's the funding. So steering's going to say things like, you know, why that one cloud, or like, can we do multi-cloud? Like they'll say like a bunch of different like things. So as far as like pricing is concerned, give options, just like kind of like, you know, make it a little bit of a proposal, but not that fierce, you know, nothing serious, but like everything that you would see and like that we would ask questions for. So other things they're probably going to want to know is like how many people have tried this. So I think that's another good step for you, is to get more folks to adopt this, especially SIGs who are more of the vertical SIGs. You know, maybe like Arch, if you want to do it in Arch because you're active there and that might be a good fit for you, or some other SIG that you have like an ally in that can kind of try to adopt this. So I think those are like probably your next two steps, which is how much detail this out, and then really get the buy-in. And I don't see us having an issue with that as long as those things are met. So, cool. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, by the way. I also wanted to circle back with you, and we do have a small crew now, I do want to talk about the time zone thing again. I don't necessarily, I feel like we didn't necessarily leave it on a good tip with you personally, Hippie. So I wanted to circle back with you because you did involve a little bit more of another scope to the initial question, and yours was more about, hey, I have other people that want to join. So my question to you is, are you talking about other SIGs? Or are you talking about this one in particular? And what do you think? What kind of suggestions do you think? Because I want to hear you out. So you know, tell me a little bit about where you were coming from there,
Sure.
so I can work with you, or we can work together.
I don't bring it up much anymore because I've accepted that this is the land we live in. But when I see the CNCF adopting a across the board thing that says our meetings will now be pinned to GMT, it makes me go, oh, maybe it is possible that we can make community-wide things that are like that. And I was a little late to the game. I didn't see so I put in our notes the CNCF TSC mailing list meeting. And I thought, wow, that's super cool. And then it was brought up again in the meeting. And I was like, cool, maybe this is the time to talk about how painful it is. Because some of my team they really like routine, as I'm sure all of us do. And I was and it's a meeting, it's not ContribEx, it's our the main meeting that we do for writing tests. It's our SIG architecture conformance subgroup project meeting, and it swings 2 hours. And so when he said to me after the meeting, he's like, I'm so messed up today, I can't, you know, can I take a break? And I'm like, well, of course you can. And I said, let me try to go to that meeting. And so I put into the conformance, our Slack channel, and I said, can we please pin this? More than half of the people that show up to this are South Hemispherians. And those are all the people doing the work. And we have a culture where a lot of folks are in the United States, and we are starting to get rid of people in other nations. And I still think we'll be minorities for a while, but not for a whole lot longer. I think this is going to be a global thing, and people on both sides of the planet are going to want to show up together.
And this is why I'm okay with this being a reoccurring conversation too. That's why I'm not like, I say jokingly, oh my, we've talked about this 8 times in the last year. But I mean, it's serious because we do have other players that come into the fold. So my thing for you is, especially in a subgroup setting, right, which is much smaller than like when we're like, oh, GMT for a community meeting of 5,000, like the sub project, like do a doodle, put out a quick doodle. Y'all, will you take a doodle really quick? Just to be like, hey, appease me. And then what your doodle should be though, it shouldn't be, it should be y'all's times of availability.
Yes.
So, you know, a window and a range, right? So I mean, not like 2 to 3 times, but like stuff that you know is going to work for you. And just say, hey, just appease me and take this doodle, y'all, right? And see what you get back, because you might get some surprising results. And the other thing is like the sub-project owners that are usually the ones that are like leading these meetings and things like that, they do think it's because like, oh, these are the people that are showing up, so therefore they're doing the work. But that might not be the case. So that's why we did an APAC meeting, right? So you might be able to swing some other people into an idea of having a second meeting and keeping it async. So I mean, there's a couple things that you can do. And I'm sorry that the work is on you too, but I think you could really help us lead the way here, and maybe just kind of like start those conversations at those sub-project levels of, hey, appease me, can we take this doodle? I really have other folks that want to join and actually do the work, but they're burnt out, or, you know, you don't even have to say burnt out, but, you know, I don't want to, you know, lead them to a burnout stage, but they actually want to do work. And some project owners, I feel like we have to appease to that, because I want people to do the work, right? So like, that's my take.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and so the same thing here. So I want to internalize that a little bit, especially with the mentoring meeting. And I'm glad that conversation's going on. So, and thank you for giving your feedback as well there. But those are like, I feel like that's a good level of things that we can change. And then once that that's kind of, in my opinion, like a little bit of a bubble up change, because then once the SIG chairs see that, oh, all of these other you know, sub-projects have these global times, then maybe we should start thinking about that from an umbrella SIG perspective, right? So change could probably happen at that grassroots level as well, which will give like chairs more of a pulse, because right now chairs don't have that pulse. And that's something that like Laurie was also talking about earlier with just other things. But there's none of that pulse. So that's why it's like, oh, well, I mean, everybody's here and we have 15 people, so that's really good. So like that's kind of what chairs are looking at. So having that kind of like pulse would be super helpful, even if it's just quick doodles and you're like, hey, this doesn't mean we're changing the meeting. Can you just take a quick doodle for me to see, you know, I want to get a pulse to see if these times are still good for everybody. I don't know, my take.
Josh, you had uncommented. Did you have a thought?
Oh, I was going to say there's already several SIGs that do have around the clock meetings. I mean, SIG scheduling has a late meeting. SIG network has a late meeting. They're there, not all SIGs. And I think a lot of it comes down to, for example, which SIGs have a chair or a TL in APAC. And then those SIGs tend to have, you know, meetings on both ends.
Hippie, yeah, oh my gosh, Hippie. You should be like, hey, how can I be a chair for the SIG?
There you go. All right.
And then maybe you more work.
Well, but I'm already ready. I'm doing it anyway. At least you got the.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing it. You're doing a lot of the organizing anyway. That's the thing about chairhoodship, whatever it's called, is like it's supposed to be chair. I mean, it's supposed to be shared. Like that's why I don't like seeing groups with just one chair, because I'm like, oh my gosh, you poor soul.
Folks stepped down, I think, recently for SIG Arch, and there was a lot of hands, so I didn't go into that. But next round, when do those? I don't. What's the process? Do you just when do they do that?
They do that's their look at the SIG charter.
Okay, I'll go look.
Yeah, look at the SIG charter, and but I also think you should really tell them too, like the chairs, like, hey, I would like to be at some point a chair. Or, you know, tell me what y'all want me to do because I want to help you. And that, like, to Josh's point, is a great way to make that change, like, just in a natural way.
Yeah. Thank you for looking at the software that I've been cobbling together from other people's open source stuff. And you for having in-depth acknowledgement of the time zone stuff. I was super interested to hear from Lappel about that. How should I refer to you?
That's fine. So my name is Laurie, but yeah, Lappel is totally fine too.
Okay. Two things. One, your document of pointing around things. And I lost my link to it, but it was a Google Doc with. Scroll back up.
The marketing one.
Yeah.
The meeting template.
Meeting template.
Yeah.
It's not in there yet. It's
in a chat.
Yeah.
I didn't add it to the doc.
We should maybe add it. I will add it to the document, like to the notes.
I am. That should be.
All right. No, go ahead.
The reasoning behind this template is that, I see a lot of groups, teams, etc., in life have syncs, and then they just kind of report status, and then the meeting becomes a reporting meeting, and not a planning and strategy meeting. And so the way that this template is framed is to try to drive the planning and the strategy. So when you get a bunch of people together in a meeting, what for? What are they to do? Ideally to plan, give feedback, brainstorm, build teaminess. So that's what the emphasis on planning is for. But it's still important to report what they've done. So this gives a space to do that, not only to each other, but then to the community at large. And then there's also the question about, like, what are the priorities? You know, what are you actually doing something to achieve? Is your vision clear?
I like the questions.
It's purpose driven. So before we go and invest time, let's be clear on what we're actually looking to achieve as a group, and then we're all aligned. And then maybe one or two people go off and do the thing, but everyone knows why. First and foremost, the people doing the work.
Thank you.
I also have to drop, y'all. I've got to do my homework for the next meeting in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your time, Paris,
Yeah.
and you drop.
Maybe we all drop off and we just continue chatting asynchronously.
Yeah.
Sure.
Laurie, I also DM'd you about a very specific thing that
I saw.
happened. So like, that's why
Yes.
I think we can all we can tie some of this together. So I'll ping you. Okay.
Yeah, I think a workflow of process could be, how do we get step by step? Well, I'll get you on the Slack.
All right, see ya.
Okay. Bye bye, guys. First.